West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
Trump's attorney general spent the vast majority of his time as the head of the Justice Department doing absolutely everything he could to cast doubts onto investigations into Trump. He argued that the DOJ and the FBI, institutions that he oversaw, were somehow part of a deep state plot to overthrow President Trump. To appease Trump in 2019, Barr appointed John Durham, a career Justice Department prosecutor, to investigate the origins of the intelligence community's investigation into Trump and his 2016 campaign dealings with Russia. Right before the 2020 election, Barr would promote Durham to special counsel, protecting his work from any future DOJ's grasp. And as Barr promised, special counsel John Durham did get to the bottom of it. But after nearly 4 years of investigating, it appears as though there was nothing at the bottom. John Durham lost the two key cases he brought to trial. They both ended in acquittals. The one guilty plea Durham did secure ended with no prison time. So despite what Donald Trump and Bill Barr would like you to believe, John Durham, it seems, found no evidence of what Bill Barr had called one of the greatest travesties in American history, which really undermines the very notion that there was a travesty to begin with. And today, in a bombshell piece from an intrepid group of reporters at the New York Times, we are learning new details about Bill Barr and John Durham's efforts to craft a counter-narrative that Trump was, in fact, a victim of a deep state plot. Here's a headline. Quote, Barr pressed Durham to find flaws in the Russia investigation. It didn't go well. The Times reports that Barr and Durham would often meet weekly in Barr's office together and drink scotch. As the Times reports, John Durham soon became a true believer, I wonder what scotch it was, in the mold of Bill Barr. Quote, as he was drawn into Barr's personal orbit, Durham came to embrace that particular attorney general's intense feelings about the Russia investigation. Probably the most explosive revelation in the Times piece is this. While on a foreign trip to Europe, Barr and Durham received a credible tip linking Donald Trump to suspected financial crimes. Rather than assign it to a different prosecutor, perhaps someone less inclined to drink scotch with him, Barr told Durham to investigate it himself. Quote, Mr. Durham never filed charges, and it remains unclear what level of an investigation it was, what steps he took, what he learned, and whether anyone at the White House ever found out. The extraordinary fact that Durham opened a criminal investigation that included scrutinizing Trump has remained secret. The investigator who was supposed to be investigating, excuse the reference, the investigators, special counsel John Durham, opened a criminal inquiry into then President Donald Trump. But no one knows what came of it. Instead, the report dives into just how committed Bill Barr was to making sure the Durham probe uncovered something, as long as it seems, that something didn't target President Trump. The Times reports that in one meeting, Barr, quote, repeating a sexual vulgarity, warned that if the NSA wronged him by not doing all it could to help Durham, Barr would do the same to the agency. Now, I can't say that sexual vulgarity on this family program, but you probably get the idea. Months out from the election and with no sign of imminent action from John Durham, Trump began putting public pressure on the men through TV interviews and Fox News. Here was the headline out of one Trump Fox News interview in August. Quote, Trump lays down the gauntlet for Barr on Durham probe, either greatest attorney general or average guy. Well, there you have it. We also learned from the Times that when Barr and Durham could not find anything regarding abuses by the intelligence community in opening that Trump-Russia investigation, then Attorney General Barr and Durham turned their sights to Old Faithful, a Hillary Clinton conspiracy. In other words, when their probe turned up nada, when Durham came up empty-handed, Barr and Durham chased down a new hypothesis. Hillary Clinton and her campaign had colluded with the government to push a Trump-Russia conspiracy. Because when all else fails, there is always the Republican Party's number one enemy, Hillary Clinton. Quote, by summer 2020, with Election Day approaching, Mr. Barr pressed Mr. Durham to draft a potential interim report centered on the Clinton campaign and FBI gullibility or willful blindness. While Durham never ended up releasing this report, the sheer desperation by the Attorney General to give Trump a Hail Mary in the months before the election is astonishing. It became clear in the months leading up to the election that there was absolutely no evidence of a deep state conspiracy against Donald Trump. So what did Bill Barr do? Quote, by summer 2020, it was clear that the hunt for evidence supporting Barr's hunch about intelligence abuses had failed. But Barr waited until after the 2020 election to publicly concede that there had turned out to be no such sign of foreign government activity and that the CIA had stayed in its lane after all. I am so pleased to be joined by former FBI General Counsel and senior member of Robert Mueller's special counsel team that investigated the Russian interference in the 2016 election, the great Andrew Weissman. Thanks for being here tonight.
So great to be here.
I had to, just pick my jaw up off the floor after reading this piece. What was your initial reaction to this?
Well, first I reacted to it in terms of the journalism.
Yeah.
This is the A+ team at the New York Times. It is, if people have not read it, they really need to. It's beautifully sourced and beautifully written. And you know if it's this team, they will have kicked all of the tires. So it was my first reaction. I wasn't surprised to read about Barr. I, in part, lived through his actions, and we were the victims of his actions. So that didn't surprise me. To me, it was more of the same on that. I was surprised by the various revelations, the fact that there were not one but three prosecutors who resigned, the reasons for their resignations, which you surmised but did not know. And then, as you pointed out, the Italy piece was beyond shocking, and that this sort of leaving it out there that this was really wrongdoing that was being investigated related to the FBI when it was actually Donald Trump, and then to give it to Durham with no sort of public disclosure about this is just a sign of what the House Republicans call the weaponization of the Department of Justice.
Yeah.
I mean, are they going to look at this? I mean, this entire article is Exhibit A to how the Department of Justice was weaponized by Bill Barr and Donald Trump. And they saw no separation between the political sphere and the Department of Justice. And for whatever you can say about Merrick Garland, that is not his fault.
Yeah.
I mean, he is independent. So this is a really good example of exactly what can go wrong when the Department of Justice is weaponized, which is something that happened in the prior administration. There's no evidence that's happening now.
To go back to what you're talking about, for those who don't recall, there was a moment when it became clear that there was a criminal investigation happening in the context of this Durham probe. As we find out today in the New York Times, the criminal investigation wasn't into the intelligence community or agents, it was into Donald Trump. And yet when the news broke about just the criminal aspect of all this, most people thought that meant that there had been wrongdoing at one of the agencies. And Bill Barr chose to not clear that up.
Well, absolutely, because we all knew what the purview was for John Durham.
Right.
So that if John Durham was looking at it, you knew it had to be within that scope, and he did nothing to correct that. And do you really sitting here think that John Durham and Bill Barr did a thorough assessment of that? It's not like they looked for it. This was the Italian government, according to the reporting, that gave them this tip. And it was apparently so convincing that they couldn't ignore it. But does anyone really think that this was investigated thoroughly? I mean, when I was at the Mueller investigation, we would have loved to have that information.
You're like, I know some investigators who would have used that.
Exactly.
That stuff. Are we ever going to find? I mean, first of all, the Durham probe is not over yet. I mean, are we ever going to find out what that criminal investigation was? Is there someone else at the DOJ who could take it over? I mean, given the fact that these guys were so reluctant to do anything that was damaging to Trump, the fact that they felt it was necessary to investigate this suggests that it's something fairly significant in the way of criminal wrongdoing.
Yeah, so it doesn't fit within any of this, the multiple special counsels that we currently have. Stay tuned. There could be more, but right now it doesn't fit within the purview of what Jack Smith has or Rob Hur. But you could imagine that with this reporting that Merrick Garland or Lisa Monaco are going to be really curious if they don't know already. And there's a good chance they don't, because, John Durham would have had to have told them about this and laid out all the facts. Now, maybe he did. But if he didn't, they're going to look at this and decide whether it's something that needs to be pursued and whether, for instance, the scope of what Jack Smith is supposed to look at gets folded into that.
This is the danger of appointing a special counsel, right?
Exactly.
You seem sort of sanguine about Bill Barr and the politicization of the DOJ under his stewardship. I was still shocked by it. I mean, it was out there to be seen, but the idea that he's back there drinking scotch with John Durham and that the atmosphere becomes poisonous and partisan enough that prosecutors are leaving the office. I mean, you've been on the inside of an investigation. What does it take to get people to resign in fury like that?
By the way, I think my view of Bill Barr, the reason I wasn't shocked is that I'm maybe starting at such a low point that this is confirmatory. So just to be clear,
you lived a different experience than I did.
I lived through that month where there was a public letter reporting to be a summary of the Mueller report, which we internally knew was completely false,
bogus,
and it's completely misleading to the American public, and having to wait for the report to come out, knowing what Bill Barr was up to, so that's sort of one piece. To resign the way that at least 2, possibly 3 people did, is huge. I mean, that there has to be something that you find so sort of unpalatable in terms of ethics. That you are going to resign. And that is, in fact, what the reporting is with respect to the number 2, somebody who was very close to John Durham, Nora Dennehy, resigned, and according to the reporting, issued a formal written statement to the group about what was improper about what was going on and how they should not be issuing this sort of interim report to play politics at Bill Barr's and Donald Trump's request. And then the second was, before they brought charges against a sort of Clinton-affiliated lawyer, 2 of the prosecutors said the evidence is way too thin. Yeah. And also, this wouldn't have been brought against anyone else. The second part of what a prosecutor has to do, which is that even if there's the appropriate evidence, it's not the can we bring a case, it's should we bring it. And they had objections to both prongs. That is really significant. I mean, you shouldn't have that kind of dissension in the ranks. I mean, I have never experienced that, where something's happening that's that inappropriate.
It is Friday, the 27th of January of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Well, how are you on this fine Friday? It's been a couple of years already, and I almost forget. No, I don't. But I like to think that it's slipping in the old memory cells about how bad the weekends turned out to be during the Trump administration. We dreaded them. And now not so much, though the weekends do prove to have certain amount of dissonance in store, and part of that might be with the police body cam tape of that poor kid getting beat to death in Memphis. Yeah, I believe it was Memphis. So, of course, I guess they've called a state of emergency. And even though they've arrested all 5 of the cops, apparently it is so bad that the powers that be, meaning the white power that be, is afraid that this is the time that everybody's going to of a darker persuasion, shall we say. They are all now going to kill every white person in their sleep, and so they have to call a state of emergency, mobilize the National Guard, etc., etc., etc. They haven't mobilized the National Guard yet, but they will, and you know they will. So that's in store for the weekend. How fun, huh? Hey, what happened to Mike Pence's secret documents that he stole? He stole them, right? I mean, he had them with him, and he wasn't supposed to. These Nazis, really. And I don't use that term lightly. The GOP, the Republican Party, has been taken over by Nazis, and it's turning out that they've been working for Vlad the whole time, and we knew it. And everybody would just laugh at us dirty hippies. Look at those stupid hippies. They just believe anything. Glenn Greenwald out there telling us that we're just little people. You're little people. Oh, really? Well, don't awaken the sleeping giant. That's all I can say about that. Well, no, I have a lot more to say about that because I can. And you know it. Anyway, everything that we basically said has come true. And I'm actually now coming to the belief, which I never really waned to begin with, but the Steele raw data file, it was not a dossier. It was raw data. It was a raw data file. Come on. Get our terminology correct. Anyway, that has a lot more legitimacy than everybody except a few of us gave it. I could care less about the salacious detail of prostitutes peeing on the bed, whether Trump was across the room looking at it or he was out of the room and told him to do it because the Obamas slept there. I could care less about that part. It was all the other parts that Michael Steele, is that his name? I can't remember. Anyway, Steele with an E at the end. Anyway, he was a well-respected Russian researcher type at MI6 over there in Britain. So it's not as if he just came out of nowhere and just, I was born to hate Trump, and so I've been put in place here to make sure that Trump isn't able to advance in whatever it is that he's trying to advance in. Give me a break. All right. I guess the power of TV is powerful because for some reason the people that watch The Apprentice, something happened to their brains. Something happened. I never watched it. I'm sure you guys never watched it. Oh, we might have had looked at a show, but I couldn't get through a show of that show. Real Housewives, too. That franchise, saw maybe 15 minutes of one show and I went, those aren't Real Housewives. Give me a break. I don't know. Well, they're real for the demographic that they are in. But I'm not enamored by watching that, and neither are you, apparently, because our brains didn't get rotted out from the inside out. Or was it the outside in? It's rotted. Their brains are rotted. What the hell has happened? And we don't have any, product liability case to be able to file? I know. We have to show that somehow we are harmed. And I got to tell you, when failed political candidates shoot up opposing parties' houses with their kids inside, I think, we are all harmed by what has happened to these rotted brains. Who do you sue? I don't know. I'd like to sue, all of a sudden I'm having a brain lock. The producers of The Apprentice and The Survivor and what else? All of that. Burdick? I can't remember. Anyway, that team somehow gave this guy, Donald Trump, who we all saw as some sort of rich boy clown. He was a clown. Still is, apparently, because look at the makeup and the fright wig. Jeez. Boo. Some people are afraid of clowns and some people hate them. So maybe that's what he's saying. I'm a clown, so people are already predisposed to hating clowns, so they must hate Trump. You're right, buddy. That's one way of looking at it. Okay, well, we are where we are because apparently we just wanted to be entertained. And when I say we, I don't mean all of us, but a sizable number that is a buying block. Apparently they spend a lot of money. Irresponsibly, too. Jeez. All right. Enough of that Friday rant. Why don't we go ahead, since we devoted a bit of time to the Durham probe? Jeez. We knew what that was all about. And we could tell what the hell was going on at the time, and now all that we had speculated has come to pass as true. All right. I'm betting 1,000% in this. Yep. No home runs necessarily, but I haven't struck out. Batting 1,000 for a long time, since I was a kid. Okay. So what do we have in store for you here on this Blue Moon Spirits Fridays in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, Virginia Democrats defeated a series of bills that were put up to limit abortion access, and good for them. A judge blocked the sale of machine gun converters after the Department of Justice sued, and that's really good. And the FBI said it hacked the hackers to bring down the Hive ransomware gang, and that's really good. After the break, we moved to the chef's table, where a Thai activist was sentenced to 28 years for online posts insulting the monarchy. That's not very good. But here's something that's actually quite good. The U.S. Treasury Department toughened sanctions against Russia's Wagner mercenary group. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page from that chat room link and down just a little bit to the left at our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and possibly if you could afford to send us what you might spend on, well, how about an espresso-type coffee drink? How did I come up with that? I don't know. Anyway, if you could afford to send those funds our way once a month, it really does help us pay our bills and pay off the new updated machinery and software that we had to purchase to continue this powerhouse of resistance against dark forces arrayed against not only the United States of America, but representative democracy worldwide, and I am not kidding. So thank you for your generosity, and we will continue to hold up our end of the bargain, and that is being that powerhouse of resistance, the little engine that could. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. You can also follow us on Mastodon, and I believe it's at netrootsradio.mstdn, Mastodon. Plus. Tom takes care of those platforms, and thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos 10 minutes before showtime, and that's where you can find the actual articles that we are, well, what are we doing? We're riffing off of them. That's what we do. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Okay, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of the Associated Press by Sarah Rankin. In a series of key votes yesterday, Thursday, Virginia Senate Democrats defeated several bills that would have restricted abortion access in the state, including a proposed 15-week ban, with exceptions, that was a priority for Repug. I like to say Repug for short, you know. That old Repug Glenn Youngkin. I like his sweater vest. Actually, I don't. They are the first decisive legislative votes in Virginia since the Supreme Court's decision last year overturning Roe v. Wade. The votes mean that, barring an extraordinary procedural move, such restrictions are unlikely to be enacted this year in Virginia, which currently has some of the South's most permissive abortion laws. The truth is, as long as Senate Democrats have our majority, the brick wall will stand strong and these extreme bills will never pass, Senator L. Louise Lucas said in a news conference after the hearing. Several similar measures are still alive in the Republican-controlled House of Delegates, but have not yet begun to advance. Anything that clears the House is likely to also be defeated in the Senate. Republican House Speaker Todd Gilbert said earlier this year that given Virginia's divided government, he did not expect major progress on abortion this year. Youngkin's spokeswoman, Macaulay Porter, said Senate Democrats had, quote, solidified their extreme position, end quote, and were acting against the will of Virginians who want a reasonable compromise on the issue. I just love how they really turn it around. I would consider that to be gaslighting. In fact, I'm not the only one. Back to the article. Virginia law currently allows abortion during the first and second trimesters. The procedure may be performed during the third trimester only if multiple physicians certify that continuing the pregnancy is likely to substantially and irremediably impair the mental or physical health of the woman or result in her death. Also yesterday, Thursday, the Senate Committee on Education and Health, which Lucas chairs, voted the three measures down on a party line basis and without debate after a subcommittee had previously heard testimony and recommended that they be defeated. The Youngkin-backed measure, sponsored by Republican Senator Steve Newman, would have banned abortions after 15 weeks, with exceptions for rape, incest, and the life or physical well-being of the woman. Violations by any physician would result in a Class 4 felony, punishable by 2 to 10 years in prison and a fine of up to $100,000. Newman called the proposal a carefully crafted compromise that supports mothers and offers common-sense protection for the unborn. He said the measure would not affect medical care in cases of miscarriage, stillbirth, and ectopic pregnancies. Sure. In no way does this bill criminalize a woman at all, he said, and presenting it earlier this month. But whenever they have to say that, you know they are. Next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Jonathan Stemple out of Reuters. The U.S. Department of Justice said it has obtained a court order blocking 2 firearms companies from imperiling public safety by illegally selling devices to convert AR-15 style rifles into machine guns. U.S. District Judge Nina Morrison in Brooklyn issued a temporary restraining order against Rare Breed Triggers, LLC, and Rare Breed Firearms, LLC, and their owners, Lawrence DeMonico and Kevin Maxwell. The Justice Department, in a civil complaint, said Rare Breed has sold thousands of devices known as FRT-15s that are designed and intended to convert AR-15 style semi-automatic firearms into machine guns. The department said this meant the devices qualified as machine guns under federal law and said the devices did not qualify for limited exceptions permitting their sale. It also objected to Rare Breed's sale of wide-open triggers, an FRT-15 copy also designed to fit AR-15 style rifles, and said Rare Breed did not comply with Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives demands to stop selling both products. Rare Breed operates in Fargo, North Dakota, and according to court papers, Maxwell is also its general counsel. The defendants did not immediately respond to requests for comment. AR-15 style rifles have been used in many recent mass shootings. Attorney General Merrick Garland said the Justice Department will do everything in its power to protect the American people from gun violence and to hold accountable those that flood our communities with illegal guns. DeMonico was quoted in the complaint as having said Rare Breed was the only company with the balls to sell the FRT-15, and that he would not turn tail and run or hide if challenged. The lawsuit seeks to ban FRT-15 sales, recover previously sold devices, and provide restitution to buyers. Satter of Reuters brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. The FBI revealed it had secretly hacked and disrupted a prolific ransomware gang called Hive, a maneuver that allowed the Bureau to thwart the group from collecting more than $130 million in ransomware demands from more than 300 victims. At a news conference, U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland, FBI Director Christopher Wray, and Deputy U.S. Attorney General Lisa Monaco said government hackers broke into Hive's network and put the gang under surveillance, surreptitiously stealing the digital keys that the group used to unlock victim organizations' data. They were then able to alert victims in advance so they could take steps to protect their systems before Hive demanded the payments. Using lawful means, we hacked the hackers, Monaco told reporters. We turned the tables on Hive. News of the takedown first leaked on Thursday morning yesterday when Hive's website was replaced with a flashing message that said, "The Federal Bureau of Investigation sees this site as part of coordinated law enforcement action taken against Hive ransomware." Hive's servers were also seized by the German Federal Criminal Police and the Dutch National High-Tech Crime Unit. Intensive cooperation across national borders and continents, characterized by mutual trust, is the key to fighting serious cybercrime effectively, said German Police Commissioner Udo Vogel in a statement from police and prosecutors in the state of Baden-Württemberg, who assisted in the probe. Reuters was not immediately able to locate contact details for Hive. It is unclear where they are geographically based. The takedown of Hive is distinct from some other high-profile ransomware cases the U.S. Justice Department has announced in recent years, such as a cyber attack in 2021 against the Colonial Pipeline Company. In that case, the Justice Department seized some $2.3 million in cryptocurrency ransom after the company had already paid the hackers. Here, there were no seizures because investigators intervened before Hive demanded the payments. The undercover infiltration, which started in July of 2022, went undetected by the gang until now. All right, let us now go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Stealing Home. In 2018, writer-director-editor Hirokazu Koreeda's film Shoplifters won the coveted Palme d'Or Prize at the Cannes Film Festival, the first Japanese film to do so in 20 years. Now Broker, filmed in South Korea, in Korean, which Koreeda does not speak, with Korean actors, finds Koreeda-san playing with similar themes in a more accessible package. On a rainy night in Busan City, a young woman places her baby son at a church with a note saying she'll return. A church worker steals the baby so that he and his partner can sell it to couples who are unable to legally adopt. When the mother, unlike others, actually returns, the two brokers must take her to potential buyers, while the whole trio is secretly followed by two police detectives who are ready to shut down the operation. Now, if this were America, this movie would be a wacky, irreverent Buddy Road film. Instead, it's an almost slice-of-life drama about love and constructed families. Our pair of thieves, played by Gong Dong-won and Song Kang-ho from Snowpiercer and Parasite, are child traffickers, and yet they sincerely want to sell little Woo-sung to good parents. Lee Ji-eun plays a torn mother who wants the best for her son, whom she can neither fully embrace nor reject. With impressive understated performances, a peripatetic plot, and two especially moving standout scenes, Broker, like Shoplifters, see it if you haven't, looks at how loving groups, our human core, are attacked and fractured by traditions and laws, mediated and frustrated by organizations like churches, orphanages, and syndicates, all of it driven by the unending, unstoppable need to make money. Broker has the same feel as Shoplifters, but the driving threats are more immediate, the characters' goals clear, and thus the stakes higher. Ultimately, though, both films are not about their great characters, but the forces that bedevil their struggles to construct families. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. Ever notice that some music just really makes you want to dance? Well, a new study shows that it is, indeed, all about the bass. Because researchers have found that during a concert, boosting the bass bumps up the boogieing. The results appear in the journal Current Biology.
Music and musical rhythm have been kind of fascinating to me for a long time, since I was a kid. And in particular, the way that they make us feel.
Daniel Cameron is a postdoctoral fellow at McMaster University. He also plays drums.
As a drummer, you're interested in making the crowd want to move and feel good and give a good, pleasurable time feel. And this is related to the work I do in science.
Cameron and his colleagues want to understand how music can engender an almost irrepressible urge to feel our bodies in motion.
And we knew from anecdotal evidence and other experimental evidence that there was an association between bass and dancing.
So people who enjoy electronic dance music, or EDM, report that the thrumming bass produces a sensation that makes them want to move. And some studies have shown that our movements are more fine-tuned when we're locked onto bass notes.
So for example, if you have people tap along to a sequence of tones, their tapping is slightly more accurate. They're more synchronized when those tones are low in frequency compared to high in frequency.
So the researchers set out to determine,
if you add more bass to music, will it cause more dancing?
Now, they didn't want to manipulate the bass line in a way that was obvious, because then people might consciously decide to step up their stepping out.
That might be interesting.
But it would also muddy the results, like if someone in a drug trial knows they're getting the real deal and not a placebo.
So we wanted to do a subtle manipulation, a very consciously undetectable manipulation.
So they broke out a set of very, very low-frequency speakers.
These are specialized speakers, kind of like subwoofers. People might have subwoofers as part of their stereo system, and these are speakers that play even lower frequencies than most systems are able to do. Even lower frequencies than we think are typically able to be heard.
With their special speakers set up, the researchers staged a concert.
We had the electronic music duo Orphix come to our live lab.
That's live, L-I-V-E, for Large Interactive Virtual Environment. It's like a cross between a performance space and a laboratory.
The people who came to the show were fans of the group. They wanted to come and see EDM. They wanted to dance. And while they were there, we asked if they wanted to volunteer in our experiment. And a good number of people signed up.
Recruits adorned themselves with headbands bearing motion capture reflectors, which the researchers used to track their movements.
And then what we did was just, during the concert, turn these very low-frequency speakers on and leave them on for 2.5 minutes, turn them off, leave them off for 2.5 minutes, back on for 2.5 minutes, off for 2.5 minutes, on, off, throughout the concert.
Now, you can't hear when the speakers are switched on. And based on the surveys filled out after the show, and a follow-up study of the manipulated audio clips, neither could the concert-goers. But their feet sure knew something was up.
And what we found was, by looking at the motion capture data, people just moved more. They covered more ground, they moved faster when the low-frequency speakers were on. So this tells us that the extra bass, these very, very low frequencies, cause more moving.
About 12% more moving and grooving. So the concert and the experiment were a success. And best of all,
people enjoyed the concert, and the more people moved, the more they enjoyed the concert.
Which shouldn't be a surprise.
Dancing and pleasure really go hand in hand together. It's something we like to do with music. It's a pleasurable response, and we show with this work that bass is part of that mix.
Next up, Cameron says he'd like to look at whether bass can help bring us together.
So people are more likely to feel good about one another and help one another if they've had some experience synchronizing their movements together. And dance is a great, fun way to do this. And this might be related to why we find dance in all cultures and throughout history for the human species. It's a fundamental part of being human.
So, to cut down on conflict, maybe just crank up the bass and cut up the dance floor. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
This is the story of a very special woman. In a matter of seconds, she turned herself into a great mathematician or an entrepreneur. Her knowledge was limitless and still is. She could also make monsters disappear, especially those that lurked in the shadows under the bed. Once, this woman put back together a teenage girl's broken heart, which had been shattered in 1,000 pieces, just by giving her a bear hug. She masqueraded as a regular person at work, but as a superhero at home. Everyone knows her as Gabriella. I still call her Mom.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need to help, complete with tips and resources at aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Are the exceptions set forth in state abortion bans actually exceptions? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The Supreme Court in Dobbs robbed women of the right to make their own reproductive choices, and instead empowered disproportionately male-dominated legislatures to make those decisions for women. Although many state laws that ban abortions have no exceptions for rape, or for incest, or for fatal birth defects, about half the states that generally ban abortion do have an exception or two in their laws. But the exceptions are so narrow and have so many preconditions, or put a medical professional in so much legal jeopardy that the theoretically available abortion is in reality not available at all. Take the rape or incest exception. It's generally available only if the woman or girl reports the sexual assault to law enforcement, but 2/3 of victims don't do that. Or the exception for the life of the mother, or a fatal fetal abnormality, where the doctor has to be certain about the impending death and faces prison himself if he can't prove it. In sum, since Dobbs, state abortion ban laws that have exceptions have been functioning as if they did not have exceptions. And even if the exceptions functioned as advertised, which they don't change the fact that abortion bans are cruel and misogynist and should be unconstitutional, which for the past half-century, they were. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1950. The cost of a first-class stamp was 3 cents. And starting on this day, one of the options for first-class postage bore the image of U.S. labor leader Samuel Gompers. The British-born Gompers was a founder and longtime head of the American Federation of Labor. The Postal Service authorized 112 million copies of the Gompers stamp. He was not the only labor leader to be commemorated with a stamp. A. Philip Randolph, head of the first National Black Union, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, was honored in 1989. 5 years later, George Meany, who led the AFL-CIO for nearly 2 decades, was featured. Cesar Chavez, the co-founder of the United Farm Workers, was pictured in 2003. In 2013, the U.S. Postal Service issued a series of stamps titled Made in America, Building a Nation. This set of stamps featured 12 historic black and white photos of men and women at work. One was of a welder working on the Empire State Building. Others featured a miner, a textile worker, and a railroad worker. The stamps included 11 images by Louis Hine, a famous photographer of working people. Secretary of Labor Tom Perez said, "Stamps are like a miniature American portrait gallery. They are an expression of our values and a connection to our past. That's why it's so fitting that this series depicts Americans at work. These iconic images tell a powerful story about American economic strength and prosperity. These men and women and millions like them really did build a nation." If you could pick one working class image to be featured on a stamp, what would you choose? A politician, a labor leader, or a nurse, construction worker, or postal worker? Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 34 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of only around 48 degrees, a tad cooler than yesterday. Quite foggy at the moment, and we are continue to be under an active air stagnation advisory, and mostly cloudy throughout the day. Winds will be light and variable. Considerable cloudiness tonight with lows near 35, and winds will remain light and variable. Cloudy early tomorrow, Saturday, with partial sunshine expected late. Highs around 45, so cooling off. And a very slight chance of rain. We did have a forecast of snow beginning next week, but looks like that might happen more towards the middle of the week, if at all. Pollen remains rated none in Rogue River itself. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 35 parts per million, and that daytime UV index remains in the low range, though it has ticked up one notch to level 2. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.38 inches. Visibility is down to a quarter mile, and relative humidity is at 99%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. And that's why it's called the Weather Underground. Well, folks out in London are reporting that they are 44 degrees and mostly cloudy. Paris is 40 degrees and cloudy. Rome is 52 and mostly cloudy. Kiev is 27 and cloudy. Kabul is 22 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 55 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 36 degrees and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 74 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 48 with heavy fog. And New York, New York is 42 degrees Fahrenheit and partly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Akvita Yavacheknikol of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A court in Thailand sentenced a 27-year-old political activist to 28 years in prison for posting messages on Facebook that it said defamed the country's monarchy, while 2 women charged with the same offense continued a hunger strike after being hospitalized. The court in the northern province of Chiang Rai found that Mongon Thirakat violated the lesa majesta law in 14 of 27 posts, for which he was arrested last August. The law covers the current king, his queen, and heirs, and any regent. The lesa majesta law carries a prison term of up to 3 to 15 years per incident for insulting the monarchy, but critics say it is often wielded as a tool to quash political dissent. Do you think? Student-led pro-democracy protests beginning in 2020 openly criticized the monarchy, previously a taboo subject, leading to vigorous prosecutions under the law, which had previously been relatively and rarely employed. Since November of 2020, according to Thai Lawyers for Human Rights, a legal aid organization, at least 228 people, including 18 minors, have been charged with violating the law, even as the protest movement withered due to arrests and the difficulties of conducting protests during the COVID-19 pandemic. The Chiang Rai court found that 13 messages posted by Moncon, an online clothing merchant, did not violate the law because they related to the late king or did not mention a specific royal figure. He was found guilty and sentenced to 3 years in prison for each of the other 14 posts. The 42-year total prison term was reduced by 1/3 because of Moncon's cooperation with the court. He was granted release on bail while his case is on appeal under the conditions that he does not engage in acts that damage the monarchy or that he leave the country.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Daphne Saladakis and Steve Holland of Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. The United States stepped up sanctions against the Wagner Group, labeling the Russian mercenary company fighting in Ukraine as a transnational criminal organization responsible for widespread human rights abuses. The U.S. Treasury Department, as part of action targeting dozens of people and entities in an effort to degrade Russia's ability to wage war, said it designated Wagner as a significant transnational criminal organization on yesterday. Wagner personnel have engaged in an ongoing pattern of serious criminal activity, including mass executions, rape, child abductions, and physical abuse in the Central African Republic and Mali, the Treasury said in a statement. Russia's embassy in Washington did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Treasury designated China-based Speakeasy China, accusing it of providing Wagner with radar satellite imagery over locations in Ukraine. These images were gathered in order to enable Wagner combat operations in Ukraine, Treasury said. A source told Reuters this week that the United States has determined that some Chinese companies are providing non-lethal assistance to Russia for use in Ukraine. White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby said Putin has been increasingly turning to Wagner for military support, causing some tensions in Moscow. He said the United States assesses Wagner has about 50,000 personnel deployed to Ukraine, including 40,000 convicts recruited from Russian prisons. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks, and is it ever? And we will meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.